please, everyone give a very warm welcome to Professor Mansfield Mela.
Thank you so much. My talk is about FASD-informed youth justice. Unfortunately, there will not be a lot of frontline, hands-on recommendations, but an overview and system-based desire. So I need some help from you to make it relevant for everybody. I want by the end of the talk for you to think about at least 2 things that you're going to do after this conference. There's a suggestion box, you're going to make lots of suggestions, but specifically about a youth with FASD. By the way, FSD is pronounced differently in Australia compared to FASD. I'm learning to be able to say it, FASD. Ours is FASD. So I would like you to think about what you would do for one individual with FASD, whether in the community or in detention, that would make their life purposeful and fruitful. The second thing I would like you to think about is what you will do based on some of the information you're going to hear to make the system well-informed. You know, information is very important. So what can you do action-wise that will make the system you work in to be FASD informed? So I hope that by the time we finish the next 28 or so minutes, I'll try and provide some view about why certain systems that should keep youths away from the justice and detention, specifically youth with FASD, why those systems fail. I also hope to cover specifically what systems can do to be able to recognize and respond appropriately to people with FASD. And I do have some resources that will be available to be able to help you. Now, I'm from Canada, so I try to incorporate some of the work our colleagues have done. By the way, it's very interesting that I've been meaning to meet Dr. Elliott, and this is the first time that I'm actually seeing her in person. So amazing, I've followed her work, and some of it I'm going to be quoting in this talk. So I'm an African from Nigeria and living in Saskatoon for the last quarter century or so. And I really do want to acknowledge that I work and thrive on Treaty 6 territory, the land of the Métis. But I think, as Mark said this morning, it's not just about the acknowledgement. I'm sad to say that in the work I do as a forensic psychiatrist, the overrepresentation of indigenous people is hurting to me as a person, and I plan and do hope to do the best that I can to try and reduce that trend. It is somewhat counterintuitive that I will stand in front of you and be talking about making a system better, a system that should not be looking after kids, a system that was not devised or developed with kids in mind. But I think we will all agree, sometimes the train has left the station, and we have to be able to catch up and do the best that we can to reduce some of those failures. For those of you who work in the correctional system with youth, and you heard in the introduction, it is an understatement or an underestimation to say 1/3 of the individuals that walk through your office, whether in the community, whether in the courtroom, whether in the detention centers, would be diagnosable with FASD, whether they know it, whether you know it or not. So I hope that this talk today incorporates for you certain things you can do just as a system, period, but also specifically for people with FASD. Recall that there is an overrepresentation of people with FASD in the justice system and in the youth system, and I'll show you some statistics including Australia. Why is that the case? Now, you would know about the issue of the neurodiverse brains of individuals with FASD that has been affected by prenatal alcohol exposure, and that causes certain actions for people to be taken that ordinarily they will not, including confessing to offenses that they did not commit. Not only do they confess to those offenses because their mental age is a youth when they're adults, there are cases, as you can see, whereby they themselves were youth when they confess to those offenses. And when a system does not take care of that type of broken net or a porous net, our statistics go up on those with FASD in the system. Additionally, and for the lawyers in the room, you will all know that there are certain legal principles and precedents and laws that are supposed to actually divert people away from the system. So, for example, being found unfit to stand trial means you're going to go into the health system. Being found not criminally responsible means you're going to end up in the health system. But the threshold to keep those with FASD out through those principles is too high for them to meet. So a lot of people would be fit to stand trial, would be found criminally responsible, and therefore the only way some of us have written to be able to handle this is to look at their degree of responsibility because of the brain damage. So we have legal systems, we have processes of interview, processes of social stresses and trauma that make some of our youth end up in a system that they don't belong initially. We also know that there are certain things that we should have done for an individual with FASD that would have maybe helped keep them away. For example, we should have identified them earlier, provided the right support, not just support, diverted them away so that they don't get into the system. But we sometimes do not do that. As well, the youth justice workers, as well as the therapists that should know how to help people with a varied type of brain, do not always have the equipment or the strategies to be able to do that. So all of those create a failed opportunity to the point whereby we end up having them in our system. So for any research that I mentioned, you would be amiss to believe that our youth system is not having an overrepresentation of people with FASD. This, I think, in my opinion, a reasonable underestimate in the youth justice system, whereby whether they are in a mental detention facility or, like in the study on your right, in Australia, up to 36% of the individuals would have FASD diagnosed. Not to talk about those that, because we cannot confirm maternal history because of some of the difficulties that they will end up with us. So it behoves us to be able to actually be able to contribute to trying to protect them, because sometimes they actually create this revolving door of coming in and out of the system. Having a diagnosis of FASD is not a factor to be involved in the criminal justice system. There are multiple people with FASD that have never interacted with the police. But those who have certain characteristics we can pick up early enough to be able to intervene. For example, they are the ones that are easily misunderstood, whose behaviors are misattributed to another behavior like deviance and defiance and disruptive behaviors. They are the ones who may have difficulties expressing themselves. You may be speaking to them thinking they understand, but they really don't. They're the ones that you may end up asking them a story, but because they can't remember, they will give additional information that you will now categorize as lying, and therefore they will end up getting in more difficulties. A study that was done in Australia here, a really nice study, gives us even a more closer insight into who these individuals are. Their type of offenses are slightly different from the offenses that we usually see, like the violent ones. So you can see this is an odds ratio of those with FASD compared to those without, whereby the offenses are predominantly reckless driving, breach of conditions, property damage, and disorderly behavior. In fact, you would probably note that things like fraud and theft and burglary is not really what characterizes them because of the executive function needed to carry those kind of behaviors. So we do have a group of individuals who have FASD, shouldn't be in the system, end up in the system, and it behoves us to be able to know what to do about those. We can ramp up our prevention strategies. We can try to reduce the trauma that a lot of them have. By the way, fourfold, there's more trauma in people with FASD than those without. We would try to identify them early, but overall, why a system really works is the cohesion in the system, and this is where I think we need the help of everyone, and I'm really pleased about what Judy mentioned. Change could be systemic, but it almost starts with me. There is something I can do, and I hope we would continue to propagate this information. So for example, it's really good to provide the appropriate support for people in a system. It's also very good to divert them to where people are knowledgeable about the conditions. Being aware in a system so we can recognize them, so we can respond appropriately, is critical to a system change. So my PhD student, Dr. Pam Buttinger, put in a model. There is a story behind this, and this is the hope part that I think I want to be able to provide for you. The center where this research was carried out, and I'm going to describe it quickly, had a report completed in 1998 to initiate recognition and intervention for people with FASD, 1998. Nothing, absolutely nothing was done until 2018. How did that change happen? We had one change agent that came around and said, we need to do something about this. And supported by the idea that rather than waiting to diagnose 50 people in 1 year, start with one diagnosis, start with one intervention. And that's how the Regional Psychiatric Center in Saskatoon now has a diagnosed team, a team that diagnoses people with FASD in the institution and the surrounding system, to the point whereby we've now gone to train people in, these are adult clinics, adult jails, by the way, but we are now working towards moving into the youth detention centers, and I'll share a story about that. The model essentially is an inverted pyramid, stating that wherever you are, in the community or in the detention centers, there are some things you should be aware of when it comes to FASD. So starting from the top, as you can see, this is the whole idea that attitudes, institutions should make every person have a different attitude. Having an attitude that there's no FASD here doesn't help. Having an attitude that nothing works doesn't help. So we need to change that attitude, because it is on the attitude change that you're now going to get people moving towards recognition, moving towards understanding, moving towards appropriate responses. So whether you do FASD work or not, there are basic things that this model recommends. You should work in a strength-based approach. You should look at how trauma has brought the person in front of you, and you should always think about the client first. That's the bottom base for anybody, whether you're dealing with FASD or not. You need to get a system to change to accommodate that. It should be everywhere in the walls of the institution and all of that. As you can see, going down onto the bottom of the pyramid, whereby we have a specialized system, you go through trying to educate people on how to refer those with FASD. but more importantly, how can they change and modify their own approaches towards people that are sitting in front of them, whether they know they have FASD or not. And that's something I'm hoping many of us will adopt as we move forward. To make a system FASD informed, you want to rattle every part of the process that the person is involved, from assessment, screening, diagnosis, rehabilitation, into the mental health court. There's some special mental health court for people with FASD, all to be aware at different levels of knowledge for FASD. A system cannot be FASD informed if those who are working in the system do not look after themselves. Self-care is a critical part of an FASD-informed environment. You have to be able to, have appropriate nutrition, look after yourself, meditation. We had about yoga today. We had about massage therapy. All of those are important, because only when you are your best would you then be able to help the youths so that they are their best. An FASD-informed environment doesn't only focus on the FASD, it also focuses on other factors, associated factors like housing, mental health, employment, and trauma that are necessary to help people live a successful life. One word that I think justifies a system that has done its work is modification. We need to modify our expectations so that they are realistic to the people we are sitting in front, because sometimes when your expectations are too high, you get disappointed and you end up finding fault in the actions of the individual. The way you carry out information in learning, the speed will have to be modified. If you're dealing with a neurotypical brain, you may go at 1 hour to finish a particular program, but you need to be able to adjust and accommodate the speed of learning that an individual with FASD has. And that's what an FASD-informed system does, whereby you modify your processes. The reason is the system was designed for neurotypical brains. And when you have somebody with a diverse brain, it challenges all our assumptions. We think that any behavior is because they're being deviant, is because they're being disobedient. You need to reframe that process and be able to understand it, focusing on a brain-based understanding. If you do not know where the deficits are, then you may not be able to understand. Every system that you want to be informed is a system that allows information to flow across. The saturation of our institutions, the community, should be characterized by the reliable information needed to produce purposeful and individuals that are going to make life positive in the community. If you think about a system beginning from the police to the detention to the courts, into the community, the probation, the youth workers, and all of those, there's a lot of communication that goes in, and we need to be able to safeguard how reasonable those information that is going through from one person to another, from decision makers to the team, across the institution, what people believe in their goals, in their vision statements. All of that should target the fact that people can change and we should give them a chance. Interestingly, the flow of information is not always what we see in our systems, and this sometimes hurts the individuals who have FASD because it creates silos, and those silos end up being the premise for which people are treated unequally, including when you do not diagnose an individual who should need benefits. For example, the NDIS, if you don't do the diagnosis, you're going to prevent people from actually benefiting from what they are entitled to. So a system that recognizes that will open doors for successful things for them. And we have reasons why this communication is really important in an informed system. The reason is you're going to be influencing people so that they can move to the next level. Remember those 4 levels that I gave you? The idea is to have a basic knowledge up to a specialist knowledge. And when information flows, people build on that to be able to be successful for themselves and for the client. Just a couple of things in terms of specifics that have been used. The language we use to address individuals with FASD is critical and is very important. The messages that people see around the place, including what a classroom has, is really important, because if you go into a classroom and there's all kinds of posters around, you have not made the place FASD informed, because people are going to get easily distracted. When you do not hear from those with FASD telling you what lights they need, what kind of blankets they need, then you have not really helped them enough, because some of them have sensitive skin that you need to be able to respond to. Additionally, there are ways to communicate for people who have verbal problems. It's not everybody who can hear something and understand. Some people are better visually, and you have to be able to accommodate that. So for example, a condition for somebody in the community should not be onerous. Sometimes we put these conditions and we know that they're going to be broken, and we still put them. So to aid that, you use icons and visuals to be able to do that. Providing a navigator and an advocate and an adult that will sit with the youth when they are being interviewed is also crucial. Really important. By the way, these slides are going to be available. Really pleased that there's lots of material to cover, so you will have access to it to say, we need to correct some of the myths. People do change. FASD is a valuable goal to understand the brain, and therefore we need to arrange some of our work around changing our policies and practices, recognizing that even our mission statement speaks volumes for where FASD individuals are being housed. I've talked about reframing, which is whereby you see somebody who is only giving you one-word answers, for example, or giving you information that is not coherent, and an interpretation is to say the person is trying to hide something, when in reality they may not be able to recall that information, and therefore an assessment will help you to understand where they're coming from. Really crucial to train people to know what the red flags are. There are multiple red flags that are available that you will see. Somebody who is always eager to please, somebody who seems to think very concretely, somebody who is not able to move one situation that they function adequately into another. You need to be able to think, is there FASD that you're missing? As well, it's very important to think about screening. Now, screening can be laborious, and so we are working with some colleagues to develop multiple avenues of screening whereby you can use in your intake assessment, or you can use specifically for screening FASD in situations where you think there's more people. So it's not to allow people to continue to fall out of that proverbial net that I've been talking about, so we can catch them, recognize them, and be able to help. Is that my warning? It's not the alarm that we need to get out, right? Okay. I'm just kind of rounding up about what else we need to consider, especially when you think about the cultural component. An FASD-informed youth justice system should think significantly about how they connect the youth with the land, with their culture, and ensure that they avoid re-traumatizing them. I think we've had enough today to recognize that individuals that are sitting in front of us have gone through multiple types of trauma. Not recognizing that is a method of re-traumatizing them, and we need to be able to stay away from that. Lastly, I want to talk about strength-based approach, because this is really critical in terms of whatever you do, whether with someone with FASD or not in the youth system. Studies have shown that people with FASD have unique strengths. And this is an example of those: creativity, artistic nature, being mechanical, being good with their hands, athletic, generous. Build on those to enhance their functioning. not on the things that they cannot do. Because of that, we have noted that people with FASD do have the capacity for human connection. And I'm going to describe a program as my take-home point today on some of the things that can really change the system. I think we've heard a lot about how programs have worked, and this is one in a youth center whereby the FASD network that we have in Saskatoon had been trying to get in for a number of years. I hope this gives you some hope. After multiple shutdowns, they heard about a young person who was being discharged into the community, and this young person had a cycle of revolving in and out of that system. And they engaged them, recognized the deficits, fulfilled some of the strategies, and assisted them to stay out. And the institution was very impressed and invited them to come in. But they thought about all the obstacles and recognized that one of the things about youth centers, at least in this particular environment, is that it is so hard to change the way people have been thinking about youth justice for a long time. And so they developed some mantra. For example, we are here to work with you, not to work at you. We're here to work with you and the youth and together. So for example, some of the examples that were really neat to find out is that to explain how someone with FASD has a unique brain, they will have everybody blindfolded, staff and students and youths together, give them instructions on how to take a piece of paper, fold it, cut part of it, and try to make a snowflake. You know, we have snow in Saskatchewan, right? And here we are observing, you guys don't have to worry about the snow at all. So we do have snow, so we use a lot of metaphors around snow. What that message was for the staff and for the youth. When they opened their eyes and they saw the difference in the paper, how it was shaped. Same instruction, same blindfolding, but different outcomes. To tell you, every brain is different. It's helpful. The other thing which I just want to share before I conclude is the fact that to work together was really important. They first asked the youth practice this, whereby they would tell a youth member to close they blindfold them and have another one give directions so that they can pass through some obstacle. They went and did the same thing with the officers and then brought all of them together. So an officer will be giving directions to the youth, or the youth will be giving directions to the officer. Guess what? By the laughter in the room, by the excitement in the room, by the teaching, recognizing that this is what you mean by executive functioning, that the person may not be able to take the instruction right, and seeing it in clear terms was a very helpful thing. So I hope through this you would get something that you're able to apply on your own, but also to the system, thinking that by making it yourself, you will help everybody that comes before you. Thank you very much.